Hello everyone. Today we will start with the module of sports psychology, and in this module we will have 4 different lectures, and today we will start with the first lecture, that is need, importance and scope of sports psychology, enhancing performance through mental conditioning. My name is Dr. Ankur Shukla and I will be discussing with you about sports psychology today. We will be covering brief overview of lecture topics first. The first will be introduction, an overview of sports psychology, its principle, its role in athletic performance. Then we will be covering historical evolution of sports psychology, where we will find the predominant historians that have written about the sports psychology content. And then we will be discussing the necessity of sports psychology. And next we will cover about the significance of sports psychology in sports. And then we will cover scope and applications in modern day of this topic, that is sports psychology. Then we will wind up the lecture by discussing the summary and followed by MCQs. For starting this presentation, I would like to start with a quote by Billie Jean King, one of the most famous tennis players. He writes, "Champions keep playing until they get it right." When we look at this quotation superficially, we find that it says that we have to regularly work hard until we get success. But when we get behind the deep meaning in this quotation, we will get that there is a lot of stress, anxiety, fear of failure and more of such emotions involved when we get to perform this quotation. So how will you get past those failures? How will you get past those missed chances? We will learn that today. Understanding sports psychology. Introduction. First we will discuss the definition of sports psychology. Sports psychology is the study of the psychological basis, process and effects of sport. Sports psychology is the scientific study of the psychological foundations, cognitive processes and emotional effects associated with sports and physical activity. When we discuss about the topic of sports psychology, predominantly we discuss about motivation of athletes, the confidence they need while performing their particular sports, the focus they need, how to manage the stress that they face during a competition, and resilience, how it influences an athletic mindset. This field applied psychological principles to enhance an athlete's mental preparation, optimize performance and support recovery, while also addressing issues like anxiety, pressure and team dynamics. According to Nicholas and Collard, there are 2 primary goals of sports psychology. First, to ensure the psychological well-being of athletes, to ensure that they are going through the right mindset, that they are not facing anxiety or stress, and to maximize performance. If we address the first issue, the second issue will automatically get solved. Now let us look at the historical evolution of sports psychology. First we will know about a clinical psychologist called Norman Triplett. He was one of the first pioneers who started to work on sports psychology, and he was a cyclist enthusiast. Norman Triplett was sitting outside his house and he was seeing cyclists, and he saw that when cyclists were performing solo, they were going through time-bound exercises. They were cycling in a good manner, but when they were cycling with competitors, he saw that then they perform slightly better than the first time. So the study focus of his experiment was social influence on performance. His experiment was, he observed cyclists and found they performed better when racing against others rather than alone. Key concept was social facilitation. The presence of others enhances performance in simple and well-learned tasks. And what impact did it make? It laid the foundation for modern sports psychology. He was the first one who experimented on it. Then we will know about Coleman Griffith. He was formerly known as the sports psychology head or the father of sports psychology. His contribution was he started the first experimental lab in the University of Illinois, and he experimented with reaction times, concentration and motivation. Worked with athletes and teams including Chicago clubs to enhance performance using psychological techniques. He was formerly known as the father of sports psychology. Now we will look at the development of sports psychology after 1920s and from 1930s to 1990s. So the first phase was very dormant period around 1930 to 1960. There was no development in sports psychology. But post World War II, Soviet Union and East Germany developed their institute and recommended sports psychologists for games like Olympics. And that is the reason that in Summer Olympics of 1980, Soviet Union was the first medal owner, highest number of medal goes to them, and the second position was held by East Germany. Then we will look at the Cold War influence on sports psychology. By the 1960s and 1970s, Soviet and East German teams actively used sports psychologists to enhance athletic performances. Global revival was done by USA, who revived it after 1960s, and then the American Psychological Association officially included it in 1986, and the British Psychological Society included it in 1993. After looking at the historical aspect of sports psychology, one question arises: what is the necessity of learning about sports psychology as physicians? So we'll look into this topic through a case study, and it is an athlete's challenge basically. Anita, a 22 years old sprinter, has been training for years to compete in the National Athletic Championship, but despite her physical capabilities, she struggles with many issues as the big event approaches. Anita used to be highly driven, but recent losses and tough training sessions have drained her enthusiasm. She questions whether all the effort is worth it and considers quitting. During practice, she often gets distracted, worrying about past failures and her competitors. In crucial moments, she finds it hard to maintain composure under pressure. She gets pressurized a lot, and she thinks about the past failures when she is performing a task. Anita experiences extreme anxiety before races, which then converts to racing thoughts, sweating, nervousness, and after a small mistake is made, she panics and loses confidence rapidly. Due to the poor performance in the previous event, Anita has developed self-doubt and fear of failure. She finds it difficult to bounce back from defeats and setbacks, making her hesitant to push herself fully in training. Now, when we identify the problem that Anita is facing, we look at the physical aspect of her problems. If we look at it in that aspect, she is perfectly fine. She does not have any problem on the physical plane. But when we look at the psychological plane of Anita, we have basic 4 complaints. First is the lack of motivation. She cannot get motivated to properly work and succeed in the upcoming competition. And due to the lack of motivation, she has lost focus and concentration. She easily gets distracted. And due to this distraction, she has emotional control issues. She gets anxious. She is going into a form of slight depression due to the fear of failure. And finally, she struggles with resilience, less levels of resilience. Now, after identifying the problem, we get a basic idea that this is a case where there is a need of psychological evaluation. And that is where the understanding of sports psychology becomes essential, for without it, one cannot recognize these underlying issues that an athlete is facing. Devoid of such awareness, addressing them remains impossible, as they do not manifest on the physical plane but reside deep within the psyche of the athlete. Now, when we have identified the problem, we know that this is the necessary part, the need of sports psychology. But the other part, like we have discussed in the introduction, how Nicholas and Collard have said, the other part is significance in performance enhancement. How can we help Anita to succeed in the upcoming competition? For that, once the underlying issue have been identified, the next pivotal role of a sports psychologist is to explore and implement strategies that guide the athlete from a state of psychological distress to one of mental clarity and resilience, ultimately elevating her performance. The first step would be rebuilding the motivation that she has lost. The psychologist help Anita set short-term goals. Now, if you look at it, if we want to succeed in a 100-meter race and we have the competition around 3 months after, then we have to set short-term goals. Rather than just winning the championship, we have to think about increasing our time by 2 seconds for the first month, then 5 seconds for the next month, and then 6 to 8 seconds for the next month. Now we have broken down the ultimate goal to small goals, and now when we will succeed in processing that small goal, we will gain confidence, we will be excited about it, and slowly we will get back on track. And eventually it will help to assess the long-term goal, that is, make training more rewarding. Use intrinsic motivation technique, reminding Anita of her love for running and personal growth. When we are going through such a situation, it often happens that we lose the basic inner or innate motivation behind pursuing a particular sport. We do not remember that we are here for the love of sport, not to compete, not to just win medals. And then we have to remind the athlete that motivation, the basic intrinsic motivation that comes from within, is the most important part. Now, next step is to implement positive reinforcement, celebrating small victories in training to keep her engaged. We let her know that these small milestones that you are achieving are good, you are doing well, and through that reinforcement process, she will get motivated, she will perform better, and eventually success will come. Now we will look at the second problem that Anita is facing, that is focus and concentration. The first step to improve that will be introducing mindfulness exercises like meditation, yoga to keep her present focused and avoid distractions. We will encourage her to do visualization techniques, to visualize that she is on a 100-meter racetrack, she is performing well, and that will give her the inner focus and concentration that she needs. We will help her use cue words like explosive start, stay sharp to keep her mind locked on the task during races. Next, we will manage her emotional control and anxiety. We will teach her breathing exercises. We will tell her that before starting a race, do a 5 to 10 second deep breath exercises, and before starting a race, 5 to 10 minutes before it, do progressive muscle relaxation which will calm pre-race jitters. Implements cognitive reframing. We will help her reframe the mindset that pressure will be seen as a challenge rather than a threat. We will help her practice stimulation training so she desensitizes with the anxiety she is facing. She will face that particular instance for one time, then another time, and then she will get used to it. Next, we will be focusing on strengthening resilience. We will guide Anita through self-reflection exercises, helping her see failures as learning opportunities. We will introduce growth mindset strategies, reinforcing that Setbacks are part of progress. Use sport hero success stories to inspire her with examples of great athletes. That can be done through documentaries, that can be done through audio, podcast, or any way possible. With these techniques, we will see that Anita regains her motivation, sharpens her focus, controls her emotion, and builds resilience. On race day, she remains calm, executes her strategy, and delivers her best performance yet, proving that sports psychology is as vital as physical training in athletes' success. Now, we'll come to look at the comprehensive list of psychological aspects crucial for sports and athletic training. First one is mental toughness. When we look at mental toughness, it is defined as the ability to remain resilient, focused, and determined under pressure. We'll look at a very famous example in Indian sports, and that is of Virat Kohli. In recent MCG match against Pakistan, after the match he gave an interview in which he focused on this mental toughness and explained to the correspondent that the reason why he succeeded is because he was going through a very much stress pressure phase in between, and he came through it. He used his inner motivation, he used his mental toughness capabilities, and at one time of the game, the win predictor suggested that Pakistan will be winning for the 97% time and there is a 3% chance for India. And from there, he regained the confidence, he remotivated himself, he set the short-term goals that I'll go for this much run in this over, and that shows his mental toughness. This is a very prominent example recently. Next, we'll look at motivation. Motivation can be defined as intrinsic or extrinsic drive to train, compete, and improve performance. When we talk about intrinsic or extrinsic, we are talking about one is innate motivation, that is coming from inside the athlete, and one is from outer surroundings, from medals, from prizes, from monetary benefits, etc. The intrinsic motivation is the better option for an athlete rather than the extrinsic motivation. We'll look at an example which is a very famous story in basketball history. One of the most famous players that ever existed is Michael Jordan. In one of the matches, there came an young basketball prospect who scored 32 points against Michael Jordan in a match, and there was a press conference after that. Michael Jordan said that particular athlete has trash talked with him. He has said to him, "Well played, Michael." And at that time, that was a very big event because nobody was there who can challenge Michael Jordan. And in the next game, Michael Jordan came with the increased motivation, and then he scored more than 32 points in half time of the match, making a record. But after many years, when a documentary was being made on Michael Jordan, he explained that it was a fake story. The young prospect never trash talked with him. Michael Jordan gave that story to media just to increase his inner intrinsic motivation. And that is how an athlete increases the fire within. It is a very famous example and a very important one too. Then we'll look at confidence, focus, and determination. Maintaining attention on task and blocking out distraction is very important for an athlete. If you have seen movie Bhag Milkha Bhag, there is a scene where Milkha Singh goes to Australia for a race, but before the race, he is distracted by partying or by the girls surrounding him, and eventually he fails in that race. When he comes back to India, he realizes that he has made a grave mistake. And the next time, when before a race distractions came, he avoided them. He maintained his confidence, he maintained his focus, he was determined to win, and finally he succeeded. So it is a very famous example for a belief in one's abilities and potential. When we look at another aspect, resilience, grit and emotional regulation, then comes the example of Sandeep Singh, hockey player who was a drag flick specialist. You must have seen his movie also. He was selected in the Olympics team. He was going from a train to travel to the airport, and one day before the flight, he was hit by a bullet, and it was an accidental bullet, but he got paralyzed, and doctor said that your future in hockey is over. But he was very resilient, he has that grit, he regulated that emotion, he regulated his depressive phase, and then came back and become one of the most famous drag specialists there was. So managing stress, anxiety, frustration and excitement effectively is very important aspect of an athlete. Then we look at visualization and mental imagery. It is the ability to mentally rehearse movements, strategies and successes. And a famous example is of Michael Phelps, the famous Olympic gold medalist who has won the most number of gold medals in swimming. He used to say that before going for a swimming dive, he used to put on his earphones, he used to go into a state of visualization, and he visualized that he is succeeding in that particular race. And that mental imagery helped him to achieve his goals. So, to mentally rehearse is a very important aspect for a sports athlete. Aggression control is also an important topic, because as we all know, in sports, aggression is highly involved. Be it baseball, be it ice hockey, be it cricket, be it football, you take any sport, because there is a high level of competition, players are going at each other, so aggression is very much possible. But the main theme of the aggression should be improving one's game, not going out of board, going into a state of panic, going into a state of frenzy. So channeling competitive aggression in a productive manner is very important, and to avoid violent encounters which hampers the spirit of the game. And next topic is sportsmanship and ethics, which is related to the spirit of the game. Because when we are going through a tournament, there is always an aspect of ethics, there is always an aspect of sportsmanship that comes. We cannot be cheating, we cannot be going out of bounds, we cannot be making a bad name for the sports that we are playing. So maintaining integrity, fairness and respect in competition is very important. And one of the famous examples was in Ashes series, when England winning the Ashes series and Australia lost, Flintoff went straight to Brett Lee and started consoling him rather than celebrating with his team. And this is one of the most famous instances in sportsmanship and ethics. Next, we'll look at recovery and relaxation techniques and managing mental fatigue, that is promoting psychological recovery. We will look at one of the most famous football players, that is Cristiano Ronaldo. He has openly said in many interviews that he practices ice bath, cryotherapy, he goes through a phase of meditation, he stays with his family, he eats a balanced diet, and all of this he does to maintain a psychological balance of his mind before a game. And that is the most important aspect for an athlete. Next, we will look at team cohesion and communication. Effective collaboration, trust and interaction with teammates is very important, because if we will not be interacting with the players that we are playing with, there has to be a point when this will affect the sport you are playing. Team sports highly demand a well-formed cohesion, flexibility within the teammates. So the leader must take responsibility to form that team cohesion, to form that communication. And a famous example from recent time is of Virat Kohli's famous 60-minute speech from the game in England. He gathered the team on the last day of the match. Only 60 minutes were left for the game. It was day 5. And he said for the next 60 minutes, they should feel like hell out there. And that motivated the whole team, and the game was finished much before 60 minutes. So, this is an important aspect, team